welcome to the Love People Use Things podcast. I'm Matt Fradd. Stick around to the end of this episode. I'm going to tell you how you can get a free copy of my new book, The Porn Myth, which is a non-religious response to pro-porn arguments. You'll get it for free, and I'll also tell you, and also sign it for you, so stick around for that. Hey, here's a question. Why do we look at porn? I mean, it's a simple question, but why do people look at porn? I mean, there might be a number of answers one gives, huh? Like maybe we go for excitement, Maybe we go for some weird sense of intimacy. Maybe we go because we want to be free to do whatever we want, and we don't want people telling us what to do, and it's our life anyway or whatever. I think porn gives us the opposite of what we think it will. I think porn gives us the opposite of what the porn industry is bent on telling us it will. And I think about this. Like maybe we go for excitement, but we become bored, right? I mean, this is why people who use porn frequently, they always have to escalate the amount of porn they use, right? And the type of porn they use or they consume. Have you ever wondered that? Like, why does that happen? Like, why are there all these weird fetishes out there? Why does porn keep getting, more and more violent? There's actually been some good neurological research on this that shows exactly why that's the case, right? And I'm not going to get into it all today. I've written about it in my book. We'll do another podcast on this. But the brain changes when you consume porn, right? You become desensitized to the images and videos that you watch, and you need more porn and more deviant forms of porn just to feel normal. Think about this. Let's suppose there's a 20-year-old guy. He's never heard of porn. He grew up in a cave somewhere, and then someone tells him about porn. He's like, "Oh, that's awesome. I want to look at insert weird fetish here." Doesn't happen, right? I mean, almost certainly it doesn't happen. Like what happens is we start looking at porn, and maybe we only watch the vanilla stuff for 10 minutes, and then we shut the laptop and feel gross. But if you do this with any regularity, you'll be watching more porn. Like I met a guy who said he would wait till his wife went to sleep, and then he would go down to the den and look at porn until about 5 a.m, and then go to sleep just as she was waking up. And he's like, "This is my life now." Maybe maybe you're like listening to me, and maybe you're a young girl or a young guy, and you're like, "Dude, the porn I'm watching today, a year ago would have made me like scared or sick. Today, it's what gets me off." There's good neurological reasons for this, right? So we go for excitement and we become bored. We have to keep flicking to the next fantasy, the next video, right? Why else do we go to porn? Honestly, it might be some kind, we feel lonely. Yeah. And it's like, I just want someone to love me or something. But obviously going to porn for intimacy is like going to a rock for satiation. It doesn't work. Yeah. We go for intimacy and we just end up what? Lonely. Don't tell me you've ever masturbated to porn, finished, and went, "I feel totally fulfilled and intimate with my partner." No, clearly not. That's not what people are experiencing after porn. Or maybe we want to be free to do whatever we want, but what happens with porn is, it promises us freedom, and we end up kind of addicted, Or for many of us, just sort of enslaved to something that we don't even like. And yet we keep going to it, but we don't like it. It's like this weird thing. Yeah. And what's ironic is they call it adult entertainment, but it makes us increasingly juvenile. So it doesn't give us what we want. But I think if you could sum up why people turn to porn, especially if they've been viewing it with regularity and they feel a compulsion to use it, I think one of the primary reasons we consume pornography is to soothe ourselves. To soothe ourselves. And what I mean by that is, we talk about triggers, hey, when it comes to turning to porn. So maybe we could think of external triggers, like an advert on television, or like a softcore sex scene in a Netflix show I was watching, or, maybe you were making out with someone and they went home and you were all horny and looked at porn or something. But it's there's internal triggers as well. There's emotional states that might precede these external triggers that make us sort of susceptible to those triggers in the first place, right? And I think what we could call this sort of emotional place might be something like emotional turbulence. Yeah, because I mean, what are those sort of emotional states that make us susceptible to triggers that end up, we end up looking at porn? We might say, well, we're stressed out. We're stressed out. Maybe we don't have enough money to make ends meet. Maybe our kids are driving us crazy. Maybe or maybe we feel like failures, like we tried something at work and it fell flat and everyone noticed, or, like maybe like we feel invisible. Like I've had girls say this to me, that one of their triggers to look at porn is they just feel sort of invisible. All right. But let's focus on the emotional piece here. Like, okay, you feel invisible. What's that like? I think those are the sorts of questions we want to ask ourselves. Like, tell me how your body feels when you feel invisible. Like, tell me about your emotional state. It's this emotional turbulence, you see. And that might be brought on by hunger. It might be brought on by, I don't know, you haven't eaten and you're just like really irritable. Irritability, I think, is a big one, whatever the cause of that irritability might be. But here's the point. With all of this, we go to porn to soothe ourselves, to regulate our emotional turbulence, right? Dr. Kevin Skinner wrote a great book called Treating Pornography Addiction. I highly recommend it, by the way. So it's a great little book. It's about 100 and so pages, so it's an easy read. And at the beginning of the book, he talks about a man who came to see him for therapy. And this man was in his 30s, and he was trying to get to the root of why he turned to porn. Well, it came out in therapy that when he was a kid, his father would physically abuse his mum. He would beat her. And on one occasion, this man, as a young boy, came out to try to separate his father and mother, right, to protect his mum, and his dad hit him. So the only way, says this man, that his mother could think to keep him in his room when her husband got angry was to take Playboy and Hustler magazines from her husband's drawer or whatever and throw it into the room with this young boy. Doesn't that break your heart? Breaks my heart to hear that. And so this boy, I mean, think about this. This boy is like looking at porn, pleasuring himself while he hears his dad hitting his mom. Like, that's an atrocious thought, right? But here's what comes out in therapy. Like, why do you look at porn? Well, again, it's to regulate this sort of emotional turbulence. Is it any wonder that when this guy's life feels out of control, right, when he feels like he's in a place of chaos, that he then turns to pornography? I think it's really important to think about this, because I think sometimes we just we can't figure out why it is we keep turning to porn. And maybe we just get super guilty and shame ourselves and say, well, we're just disgusting bad people. That's really unhelpful to talk to yourself like that, by the way. Like after a fall and you just talk how you're like a piece of crap. Like, first of all, it's not true. Like, you're not a piece of crap. And secondly, all that does is put you in a state of emotional turbulence. And guess what happens for you, apparently, when you're in a state of emotional turbulence? You turn to something to pacify that emotional turbulence. You turn to something to soothe that emotional turbulence. And for you, it's been porn, probably, right? That's why you're listening to this podcast. Now, we all have things like this. I think that's important to point out. If we feel irritable, we can't just be alone with ourselves. It's like we always have to be distracted. One of my favorite philosophers was 17th century Frenchman Blaise Pascal. He actually invented the first calculator. He was a polymath, great philosopher. And Pascal has this line. He says, all of the world's problems boil down to this fact, that that man, and he means men and women, doesn't know how to sit alone with himself in a dark room silently. Isn't that a fantastic line? Like, can you sit alone by yourself in a dark room silently? Can I? Like, sometimes I'll sit, right? And I'll just be in silence. And I'll notice within me all of this desire to reach for my phone, right? To reach for something, to call this person. Now, I think sometimes that's fine, but I think look, let me just put it this way to you. If you don't know how to sit for 10 minutes alone in a dark room silently, something's going on. Like, try it. Seriously, try it. No podcasts, no music, nothing to look at, like no reading. I'm talking sit down. And I think what you'll find is this turbulence. It's like we just want to reach for something to distract ourselves from this interior irritability. Right? This is why you're addicted to social media. Right? Like, this is why I'm addicted to social media. And here's the thing, maybe you've never considered I might say addicted, I mean it in the loose sense, I suppose. I mean that you find yourself doing this. You click from email to Instagram to Twitter to Facebook to email to Instagram to Twitter to Facebook to email to Instagram to Twitter to Facebook. You spend like 50 minutes doing this, or however long, and you do it because occasionally you'll get a like or a heart or an email or a reshare, a retweet or a share, right? And it feels good. Like, you get, like, literally stuff happens in your brain and you feel good. And it's like you're on a bloody, you wonder why people get addicted to poker machines. We call them pokies in Australia. This is why. And you're essentially getting like 3 hearts in a row when you see a heart, when you see a share. Like, this stuff is addictive. But we turn to it a lot of the times when we feel like, I do this. Don't hear me say you do this and I've got it all together. Sorry, if you're looking for a guru, I'm not him. I'm not him. I notice this. I got 4 kids and I love them dearly. But when the house is a mess and when the kids are fighting, what's easier? To sit down on their level and explain to them why it's inappropriate to talk like this to their sibling and to, organize them and myself into cleaning the house? What's easier, that? Or go into the bathroom and just checking social media for 20 minutes. That. And what am I doing? I'm distracting myself from my emotional turbulence. I'm trying to calm down. Right? This is why for many of us at night, when our resources are depleted and we're exhausted and our, people are driving us nuts and we're just trying to unwind. This is why we drink. This is why we binge on Netflix. This is why we consume large quantities of peanut butter M&Ms. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a healthy way to calm ourselves, right? But then there are less healthy ways, like eating peanut butter M&Ms and whiskey and stuff, right? Yeah, I'm not saying that's bad all the time, of course, but if you do it a lot, it kind of is unhealthy. But then there's stuff that's like super unhealthy, and that's pornography, because it gives us the biggest kick. It gives us the biggest, soothing. And this is why I think many of us get hooked on porn. And this is why it's really important for you not only to understand the external triggers that lead you to look at porn, that you also understand your emotional state that makes you susceptible to these triggers, which leads you down the pornography highway, if you will, to look at porn. So, if you want some homework, here it is. What are your triggers? External triggers, sure. And you want to avoid them, right? Like, you want to avoid them. Like, I don't think you should be watching Game of Thrones, especially if you're listening to this podcast. Like, if you're listening to this podcast, it's been 15 minutes or so right now. You're probably the kind of person that shouldn't be watching stuff with sexually. Look, do what you want. Again, I'm not here telling you what to do, but I do think it's important. If you want to stop looking at porn, you need to realize, what are those triggers that lead me to look at porn? And if softcore sex scenes on shows that you binge on are one of those things, then you need to cut it out. But the other thing I want to ask you, and this is a little more difficult, is to think about the emotional state that precedes the trigger that leads us to acting out. All right. Like your need to constantly dissociate. Right? The reason we play games on our phone and we're avoiding stuff and we kind of know we're avoiding stuff, but sometimes it really takes a good counselor to get us to the bottom of this stuff. Like some of it's obvious. Like I think that guy who went into Dr. Skinner's office and said his dad beat his mom, and that might be on the obvious end of why he now looks at porn when he's chaotic. But for some of us, stuff happens and we just go into pilot mode. Like maybe your parents said something to you that's kind of got you vibrating. That's the word I use for emotional turbulence. And then you need to sort of pacify, soothe that emotional turbulence, right? Right, to soothe that sort of vibrating, and you just turn to your phone and you're not dealing with it, and you might not even be aware that you're avoiding something. Right? This stuff leads us down the road to porn. So what are your triggers? What are your emotional states that precede those triggers that make you more susceptible to look at porn? That's what I want you to think about this week. And you know what? If you're not accountable, it's not going to help. Like if you don't have good accountability software like Carbon and Eyes, right? If you're not chatting, like let's say you're a young lady and you're not reaching out to another woman to talk to her about what's going on in your heart and in your mind, you need to do that. And you need to talk to her about your triggers, and you need to talk to her about, stuff that's going on with you. Because that's how we heal. Like that's how we need people in our lives that care about us. Because when you fall to porn, remember I said earlier, you hate yourself and you say all those unhelpful things to yourself. You need someone in your life who can remind you that you're not a piece of crap, right? This week, I want to talk about Bloom for Women. I said every week I want to talk about a great resource. Bloom for Women is fantastic. Bloom for Women is fantastic. What is Bloom for Women? Well, sometimes I'll go and I'll give talks, and I'll be talking to adults, and I'll usually have a wife or a woman who's with this guy who looks at porn. And she might say to me, what can I do about my husband? Or what can I do about my partner? Which is a reasonable question, right? But I think another question ought to be asked before that, and that's what can I do about me, eh? What can I do about me? This is something that's, counselors are beginning to call betrayal trauma. In my book, Restored, that my wife and I wrote together for women, I shared this study that showed that women who are with men who look at porn, might be exhibiting signs identical to those with post-traumatic stress disorder. There's this thing called betrayal trauma. So if you're a wife, if you're a woman who's married to a guy, or not married, but just, dating, living together, whatever, Bloom for Women is the place to go. Bloom for Women is the place to go, because it will really put you on the path to healing. Because think about it, if you're a woman and you're with somebody who's looking at porn, you don't necessarily want to bring up his dirt to your girlfriends, because one, you don't want them to think of him as a jerk, because he might not be a jerk. He might just be struggling with this thing. And you might think, well, if it was my struggle, I could bring it up, but I don't want to kind of, whatever. That said, I think you should speak to your boyfriend or husband and say, I need to talk to someone. Anyway, the point is, go to bloomforwomen.com, because that'll put you on the path to recovery. All right. Earlier in the show, I told you that you can get a free copy of a signed free copy of my new book, The Porn Myth. I want to tell you about some things right now. If you join the Love People Use Things campaign, because you see, this is more than a podcast. I travel the country and speak on college campuses and high schools and to groups of adults and all sorts of conferences. And by your support, I'm able to do this. If you join the Love People Use Things campaign for $10 a month, I will send you a signed copy of my book, The Porn Myth, Exposing the Reality Behind the Fantasy of Pornography. That's a non-religious response to pro-porn arguments. I'll also send you another book, Smart Parenting in a Sexualized World. You will also get 1 month of Covenant Eyes for free, which is the best filtering and accountability software on the web. If you've got kids, stop what you're doing and get it immediately if you don't already. I'll also give you a free Love People Use Things sticker for your laptop or car or whatever. You'll also get 25% off a Love People Use Things t-shirt, which is awesome. And you'll also have access to free live stream events that we will be doing soon for men. We'll also be doing ones just for women. We'll also be doing ones for general audiences and ones for parents. And this is so if you want to have the whole love things, sorry, not love things, that's the whole point you're here. Love People Use Things experience, join the Love People Use Things campaign. Now, the way you would do that is by going to lovepeopleusethings.fm. That's lovepeopleusethings.fm. Click support, and that will take you to our Patreon page. You give $10 a month, and we'll ship all of that stuff to your door. I don't care where in the world you live. You don't have to pay for shipping. We will send it all to you, just as our way of thanking you for being such an awesome person. I hope this has been a real help for you this week, and please tell people about the podcast. And if you want to do us a favor, it would be super great if you would consider reviewing Love People Use Things on iTunes. I think that helps people find us when they're looking for good content. Until next week, I'm Matt Fradd. Have a good one. Stay porn free.